Sports Professor Rick Horrow inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports, and you are on the record. A unique podcast, at least I hope so, that talks about the past 50 years, COVID, and the next 50 years of the sports business, where it's been, what the challenges were, and where it's going. Every week, we will theme it around major events and a mega interview, and hopefully you'll be entertained and you might even learn something. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, and you're on the record. Sports Professor Rick Horrow inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports, and on the record, Major League Baseball after the World Series. A $5.45 billion payroll team beat the $7.5 billion payroll team. Those are in the stratosphere. When you look at the downside and the bottom of it, $1 billion net worth with the Marlins, that's not bad, but at the end of the day, the leveling of the playing field has to be dealt with. But a marvelous World Series for big markets. Sponsor deals off the charts. Television deal bigger than ever. And the bottom line is baseball's stability is bigger than it ever has been before. It's a tribute to existing, but also prior leadership. And obviously, Rob Manfred at the helm today. Bob DuPuy, the president and COO of Major League Baseball from March of 2002 to 2010, very integral figure. Before and after, involved directly in Foley and Lardner and its sports and entertainment group. Joined Foley in 1973, and again, after 18 years involved in Major League Baseball, and more so even now, as a kind of confidant to everybody involved in Major League Baseball. He was the principal outside counsel beginning in 1992, and really important, obviously, the initial CEO of Major League Baseball Advanced Media, and chaired it from 2001 to 2010. $37 million per team for the media rights at the time, and even bigger going forward. Bob DuPuy, obviously very important in the industry, very important in Major League Baseball. After the World Series, it is only appropriate that we talk to Bob about law, the law firm, Major League Baseball, the industry, past, present, and future. He's obviously a contributor also to the Sport Business Handbook, well-versed in the business. Here's Bob DuPuy. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, the business of sports inside the trillion-dollar industry, weekly segment with the foremost opinion leaders in the history of sports, and I can't think of anybody better as a leader in the history of sports, history of baseball, and more than that. The guy started his legal career at Foley and Lardner and spent most of it there, took some time off as the president and COO of Major League Baseball, including the chairman of the Advanced Media Committee, MLB Advanced Media, from 2001 to 2010. Truly an inspirational person to talk about baseball, sports, legal practice, life, and friendship. Robert A. Bob DuPuy. How's that?
That was really good. I can think of lots of leaders in baseball, but that whole thing, that was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, but you're the best. You're the only one I play golf with, so I guess we're going to leave it at that. So a snapshot, Bob DuPuy, Dartmouth, Cornell Law. When did you make the decision that you were going to practice sports law? I know the answer, but kind of it happenstance, right?
Well, like many things, it was serendipity. We happen to represent the Milwaukee Brewers, and of course, the owner of the Milwaukee Brewers was Bud Selig, and I had done some work for the Brewers, and then we were brought into the collusion cases in the late 80s, and I was brought into that, and then basically spent full time on that for almost a year before they got settled, and then worked with several owners in the transition from Commissioner Vincent to Bud, became the principal outside counsel for MLB at that point. And then when Bud took the job full time in 1998 and Paul Beeston was installed as president, Bud asked if I would move to New York and, take on the role of chief legal officer and be sort of his eyes and ears in New York while he was in Milwaukee. And I said I would. And then when Paul left in 2001, I became the president and COO and held that position, and along with, as you mentioned, being chairman of MLB.com from then until the time I left in 2010. And since that time, I went back to Foley and have done various sports things, not just in baseball, but in other sports as well, until my retirement 4 days ago.
Yeah, but your retirement is a small R. I guarantee you that. We're going to be seeing a lot more of you. The idea of being integrally involved in baseball and the EVP and chief legal officer move to New York, was that a hard decision?
Sure. I mean, I had been with Milwaukee, I've been with the firm my entire career. I was on the management committee. Our family had been raised in Milwaukee. We had spent 25 years there. We love the city. We love the people. We were big Brewer fans and Bucks fans and Packer fans. And, the idea of, I grew up in Connecticut. The idea of going, back east was an emotional one. But, the idea of being able to help the sport and help Bud and help the sport grow. And since our kids were grown, we decided to take a flyer and do it. And it worked out just great.
And the presidency, the March 7, 2002 announcement, it's like you wake up and you say, I'm basically the guy that's doing all the work's the wrong word, but you had the future of Major League Baseball in your hands. How did that make you feel?
Well, I like not to think of it quite in those terms. We had gotten through 9/11 and which was obviously traumatic in New York, and it was there were an awful lot of good people in the offices there, and a lot of people who were committed to the game and committed to helping, and it really was a joy to work for the game for so long.
The biggest issues, you could say the biggest challenge, the collusion grievance stuff in 89, 90, that obviously tested your legal skills, but it was a major issue at a inflection point for Major League Baseball.
Baseball had not had a particularly good relationship or labor situation for some time. There was a lot of animosity and obviously all of the litigation and the work stoppages. And while I think the thing that I am most proud of during my tenure as president COO was the building of renovation of 21 ballparks and turning the game around economically, and obviously the formation of MLB.com, which has been an industry leader and I think a sports leader since its inception, but also having 2 labor deals during that period of time without a work stoppage, which was the first time in over 30 years that we actually had a tenure, and then Rob obviously continued that during the start of his tenureship as commissioner, and it is, while it remains contentious and will remain contentious, it's a much better situation than it was 25 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, we'll talk about both of those, all of those. There are too many to mention. You humbly talk about doing all the stadiums and doing all the advanced media, but let's start with the media stuff. In 2001, you had a concept, and the concept was, let's make sure that all this new media is shared equally. Let's make sure that all these teams get along. Now it's over 37 million a team distributed to MLB advanced media. Was it easy to get consensus?
No, and it took 2 years, and it literally is the first time in over the 125-year history of the sport where the owners, and give them a lot of credit, where the owners actually said, here's an asset, and maybe the whole is actually going to be worth more than the sum of the individual parts. We'll throw this on the table. Go see what you can do about it. And thanks to the Jerry Reinsdorf, David Glass, Drayton McLean, Jerry Colangelo, the owners who served on the board and who had the vision, and the other clubs, it's been an enormous success. Each of the clubs invested somewhere around $3 million. It took about $100 million to get MLB.com launched, and the trade press reports that MLB sold the non-baseball part of MLB.com for $3 billion a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years ago now, and that's a pretty good ROI.
A great ROI. I think a lot of it has to do with the humility and political astuteness of Bob DuPuy. A lot of it, however, has to do with the fact that the money hadn't been divided up yet. Let me just ask you a hypothetical. If the new media dollars already had been kind of staked, and let's just say that the new media dollars were kind of like local media today, and the Dodgers, hypothetically, according to published reports, make about $8.35 billion over 25 years with their charter deal. About $2.4 billion is local TV and $1.84 billion is national TV. Would a deal ever gotten done if those revenues were already allocated beforehand?
That's a great point, Rick. I mean, I think there are three things. Number one, our timing was impeccable. If it had been 2 or 3 years later, we started this in '99, got launched in '01. If it had been 2 or 3 years later, and people had seen what the arc of the technology and what the arc of the internet was going to be by then, I think there's no way that everyone would have been willing to pitch in, their rights but the owners had the foresight to do so, and they look back at what happened with the NFL. I mean, the NFL has been successful in part because of the foresight of the owners in pooling national broadcast revenues when they started, so that the Green Bay Packers could in fact compete on an equal playing field with the New York Giants. So, and I think the clubs, did recognize that, and we protected local television rights. We didn't allow streaming in the territory, and that in fact left some significant amount of money on the table, and the clubs fought about that for a while. But at the end of the day, I think it worked extraordinarily well, and I think Bob Bowman and his people did a great job in terms of the presentation. I think I'm obviously biased. I think it's the best website in all of sports. It's got enormous content. Baseball is a statistically driven sport. People care about it. People care about the vertical nature of the sport, and you have 2,000 games, a year, and I think all of that is sort of made for the internet. It's worked out very well.
And we'll get back to stadiums and fan experience and all that, because I know that's an important part of your platform backwards and going into the future. Is there any way to put the local guaranteed revenue toothpaste back in the tube? I have no idea how to say it, but look, the Dodgers have a $5.4 billion net worth according to Sportico, and the Yankees $7.5 billion. Those, not coincidentally, were the two teams in the World Series, and not coincidentally, those are the teams with the extraordinary local media deals. What does baseball do about all that?
Well, first of all, be fair. The Yankees haven't been in the World Series for
that's right.
15 years, and the Dodgers won the off year, the COVID year. But apart from that, it's been a while for them too. There's a revenue sharing plan in place that tries to reach some kind of equity between the large market and the small markets. Would the small markets like it to be more? Yes. Would the large markets to be like it to be less and see themselves in the World Series even more and have larger payrolls? Of course. I mean, it's not a secret that George Steinbrenner believed that the New York Yankees should be in the World Series every single year.
Yeah.
But you don't want a Harlem Globetrotter situation either. So do I think there's a chance that all of those revenues will ultimately get pooled? No. Although, with what's happening with the RSN landscape, that clearly could provide some narrowing of the gaps, depending on, what club, how much MLB does on a national level in terms of producing local games, and how much revenue they're able to generate from all of that.
Yeah, and teams like the Phillies' extraordinary RSN deal, they come out of the pack, have a lot of revenue. It doesn't guarantee success. Money doesn't buy happiness, clearly, but you'd rather have money than not have money.
It buys a chance at happiness.
It buys a chance at happiness.
You can buy more raffle tickets if you have more money.
Unless you're the A's. We'll get to their stadium issue in a minute. Let's talk about stadiums. You have been incredibly successful in leading the renovations and building of all of those stadium deals. What is the next big challenge with the fan experience, both in baseball and other sports, relative to stadiums?
Yeah, first, your comment is way too generous, but I am pleased with all that did happen during that time, and how many stadia have become really hubs of urban development and centers of community involvement. I think it's fascinating. For 40 years, everyone focused on, let's build the stadium downtown. Let's have the entertainment that's involved with having the stadium downtown. Let's have it be part of the urban landscape. And it worked in a number of communities. It worked in San Diego with the Gaslamp District. It worked in Baltimore, which was one of the first. It certainly worked in Denver, where the Blake Street turned into a real entertainment hub. And then all of a sudden along come two things. Number one, the Atlanta Braves, who build their stadium outside the downtown area. They move from downtown into a suburb, and they create the Battery, which has been an enormously successful entertainment district, and they have benefited from that enormously. And then the second thing that happened was COVID. And that's changed work patterns. It's changed the number of people who come into the city every day. It's changed the number of people who are willing to stay, have dinner, and then go to a game and then go home. And the question is, now people are saying, gee, if we're going to build a ballpark, maybe we ought to build it where the suburban or exurban growth is occurring. And I think that's going to be, an interesting challenge over the next 15 or 20 years as some of these stadia start to become replaced. The second thing that's fascinating is the focus on the in-stadium experience and the luxury experience in stadium. And that clearly is a reaction to other forms of entertainment that are available, but B, how much the home experience has improved, and how sitting in your easy chair, with a 70-inch TV with the high definition qualities now and the type of sound now, and who knows what's going to happen in terms of holograms and the ability to someday really be sitting in the middle of a ballpark. They have to, the teams have to get over, the cities have to get over people's inertia if they can sit and have a fabulous experience at home and get them to come to the ballpark. And so there's going to continue to be, I think, enormous focus on ballparks being social centers. You've seen luxury suites combined into sort of, bigger areas where people can come and mingle. You've seen bars and restaurants attached to stadia that don't even have, access to the stadium, but are just there. And I think all of that is going to be, the next wave of stadium development.
Jeb Terry and the Cosm company with $1 billion market cap and Dan Gilbert investing in it. All of a sudden, they're going to put a new one of these deals in Detroit. HKS designed one in North Texas, designed one in Hollywood. And these are artificial intelligence, hologram-based facilities where you actually feel like you're at a game. It is ironic, as you said, that the experience of going to a game has become better, but everybody wants the experience to feel like you're at home better. And at the end of the day, both have to be good because you're competing for the entertainment dollar, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And it was interesting when a couple clubs first started to experiment with, the box seats having monitors so you could watch and you could watch replays. People hated it. They absolutely hated it. They didn't use it. They didn't want it. They wanted to watch, the game live. And so there is that balance of being there and being in person and being surrounded by fans, that make it such a fun experience for everybody.
All right, we're going to ask a few questions at the back end of this for our GBE on what he thinks of certain things. Generational baseball expert. That's going to be our new title for you from now on till the end of time. First of all, free agents paying players, 27% drop in free agency from last year, but the top 10 players making nearly $500 million, a 6% increase. You could ask, I could ask the silly question, like, are players making too much? But is labor peace still going to be the order of the day? Is there going to be long-term harmony with player salaries?
I don't know. I really don't know. Now the minor league players are being, are part of bargaining unit, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. You see what's happened with the NBA and the salaries in the NBA and the disparity between the top and the average, and some of that is happening in baseball as well. It's a difficult balance because you're creating tension not only between ownership or management and the players, but maybe some tension among the players themselves as well. And it will be an interesting time to see how all of that sorts out. Now, everybody's making, a significant amount of money, and no one's going to cry for the owners or for the players. The fans aren't going to, and they're not, and they're going to resent an increase in ticket prices if there's any way that it's attached to increases in salaries. But I think the labor piece is important, and I think there will be some tension again over the next 10 years as all of that sorts out.
Sponsorship sale nationally, league-wide, and locally all-time high. Yankees $25 million a year with the Star Company just for the jerseys. How much is too much, and where do you draw the line as far as making a baseball player look like a NASCAR driver?
Oh, I don't think we're even close to that. I think the game. I think they've done a remarkable job. I think the game's in great shape. I think that the obviously the rule changes and the time, it's shown in attendance. It's shown in ratings. It didn't hurt to have the teams you mentioned, the Yankees and the Dodgers, in the World Series, the two MVPs in the World Series. All of that, was exciting. It was an exciting playoff run for everybody from the beginning. It was the whole month was terrific. But I don't think, people talked about the Dornich signs and the outfield signs. Remember, 30 years ago, there was nothing. And, they help pay the rent, and they're not a distraction to the game on the field.
Fair. Yankees worth $7.5 billion, Marlins less than $1. How do you level the playing field? You kind of answered that a little bit already, but that is an issue.
Well, it's an issue for the owners, sure, but the person selling the Marlins next time is starting with a lower base, and so we'll make some money. No franchises don't decrease in value; they always go up. It's a question of how much they're going to go up. And again, I think the sport is in very good shape and very healthy. You got to do something about Oakland. You got to do something about obviously the ballpark in Tampa, particularly with the horrible devastation from the hurricane and what they're going to do short term, let alone long term. But other than that, you've got 28 very nice ballparks right now housing major league teams.
Why is it that every time you ask a question about A, you talk about B, and there's my next series of questions? What's wrong with you? Just stick to the damn question, and I will ask the next one.
I like B.
Yeah, I like B.
I choose B.
Yeah, here's B. Should the White Sox be relegated?
No, they shouldn't be. They didn't have a very good year, but I'm confident they'll be fine.
I know I'm kind of kidding about this, but it would be an interesting question because most people don't understand what we're talking about relegation, and it is the core of every major soccer league in the world. Is there any future where there is a financial penalty for non-performance that could be bestowed by a league?
I don't know about a financial penalty, but I actually have a friend who has come up with a relegation idea, and it isn't so much that you'd be relegated to a minor league status because you've got problems with population of cities and what you do about attendance in a 162 game season, and that would be problematic. But in relegating teams to like a separate division, and they would play among themselves, and one of them would make the playoffs, and then they get reshuffled. But I think there's an awful lot of interest in the integrity of the divisions and the integrity of the leagues. And when the Brewers flopped and moved from league to league, and the Astros did, there was a fair amount of pushback. But over time, it all works out.
Over time, it all works out, and that's your point: a voice of reason and consistency. Almost to the end. Here's the book that you know about because you wrote it.
An excellent book.
Oh, by the way, everybody who's listening ought to buy 6 or 7 of them. You wrote in my book, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt asked Commissioner Landis to keep baseball on the field when World War II was raging, it was a welcome diversion. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but then you talk about the sense of normalcy after September 11, the George W. throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium before Game 3 of the 2001 World Series. You were a steward during one of baseball's turbulent times and continue to be an amazing steward to add to the intellectual lore and history of the game. What are you most proud of? And you should be proud of being a trustee of baseball, but what are you most proud of?
The longevity and the strength of the sport through all of those times, and that while it may have been a very small part, the part that baseball played in the national consciousness during World War II and in the recovery after 9/11. I mean, that World Series between the Diamondbacks and the Yankees, may have been the best World Series ever, or certainly one of. President Bush, coming out to the mound. I'm going to engage in a diversion for a second. It was fascinating to watch Derek Jeter come out during the World Series to the mound at Yankee Stadium and throw the first pitch, because I remember his advice to President Bush, who asked him, "Is there anything I should do?" And he said, "Pitch from the mound and don't bounce it." And President Bush did that, and Derek Jeter did that. He lived his own advice. That was excellent. But I think the strength of the sport and the fact that it's endured, and the fact now that it seems to be willing to adapt to the changes in culture and the changes in mood and changes in attitude. People, don't want to sit through 5.5-hour doubleheaders anymore, as they used to do Sundays regularly and holidays regularly. I mean, the world has changed, and I think baseball has changed with it.
You ran an incredible ship there, and now you just retired from one of the best law firms, if not the best law firm on the planet. What's next for you for the next 70 years?
Yeah, taking away the 70. I don't think I'm going to do, frankly, much different than I have been doing. I will continue to try to help people, give people advice. I'm more than willing to counsel with people with regard to what they're doing in the sports arena or in the legal practice arena. And I'm still going to do some stuff. I'm fortunate enough to be able to still do some stuff with the firm and stay in touch. And I've been, and I will enjoy my kids and my grandkids perhaps a little bit more than I've been able to over the last 40 years.
I guarantee you the sports world, the world in general, is in a better place because of you being in it, and I'm honored to have you as a friend. Bob DuPuy, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Rick. You're very kind.
Sports professor Rick Horrow, the business of sports inside the trillion-dollar industry. See you next week with more great folks. Well, Bob DuPuy gives us that tremendous perspective about the growth of the $1.3 trillion industry. Let's look at the 5 biggest issues over the last couple of weeks or so that made the industry even bigger. Number 1, Jake Paul wins. Mike Tyson doesn't. The biggest winner? Netflix. 65 million concurrent streams. The final version of the numbers released in the next coming weeks or days, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano averaged about 50 million views. That's pretty significant. Netflix itself boasting 283 million subscribers. They hold the event and everything on the sports world's streaming expertise. They'll be the grand event for advertising, the Super Bowl. But take a look at what happens now as streaming becomes the pivotal point in accepting the deal, especially with the NFL Christmas Day doubleheader for the first time on Netflix. They had a reality show called Love is Blind, disaster. They also, remember, had the roast of Tom Brady in May. That was 22 million viewers. That's fine, but not 66, and not an event that everybody's talking about. That was definitely a home run, no matter what the final numbers were and are. That's number 1. Number 2, ESPN sublicenses Big 12 football and basketball games to TNT as part of the Warner Brother Discovery NBA settlement, 5-year agreement. The partnership is now expanding with the NBA. ESPN lands the deal to sublicense Big 12 football and basketball. The Wall Street Journal reports games would air on TNT as well as on Max. The announcement expected next week, but it looks like it happens, and it also preserves the iconic Inside the NBA with Kenny the Jet Smith, Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal. That's a big deal for viewers. As far as TNT's first foray into the college football space, the network also has the Big 12 basketball and football games to pair with its new NASCAR media deal. Big 12 begins an extension of its media rights deal with ESPN and Fox in July of next year after agreeing to a $2.28 billion deal shortly after Commissioner Brett Yormark took over. The third richest media deal of the Power Four conferences. He calls it his crowning achievement as commissioner, and who can argue? That's number 2. Number 3, global Formula One style rugby franchise league to launch in 2026. Financial investments being secured. The Times says the league would feature 8 rugby franchises on the men's side, alongside a potential women's competition. Each round of 14-week campaign games taking place in a different city. The environment mixes with concerts and special events. The top 280 players in the world have been targeted, and it looks like it's patterned after the Indian Premier Cricket League and other successful ventures. So that's number 3. Number 4, Diamond Sports Group, formerly, obviously part of the naming process, Sinclair, old Fox, Bally's, and now FanDuel, emerges from bankruptcy that began in 2023. They'll cover now 31 states, 16 networks, 27 produced professional sports franchises, 6 baseball, 13 NBA, 8 NHL. Already negotiated some deals with the Angels, the Marlins, Tigers, and Rays. They're also doing pay-per-view pricing for NBA and NHL matchups at $6.99 through its direct-to-consumer app. Bottom line is, compared to where they were about 5 weeks ago, they are in much better position, and all of the team rights are as well. That's number 4. Number 5, the Rays ballpark, some say all but dead. $1.3 billion ballpark for the Rays with Tropicana Field area replacing the existing facility. Pinellas County already postponed the vote to tie the bonds into a guarantee for the real estate development. That's number 1. Number 2, Milton caused about $56 million of damage, and the county and city agreed to pay the $25 million covered by its insurance policy, but no more. The inflation of the overall price has raised, and Rays owner Stuart Sternberg said, quote, last month, the county commission upended our ballpark agreement by not moving forward. Looks like they may start some opportunities to look elsewhere. We don't know yet, but it seems to be trending in that right direction. So that's going backwards. The top 5 we've looked at. How about the top 5 going forward? The 5 to watch. First of all, watch Taylor Swift conclude her Eras tour. It's grossed about $2 billion to date. 6-concert run at Rogers Center in Chicago. She'll end the 21-month tour in Vancouver at BC Place. The example of committing to teams and stadiums with the Bonanza Amazing Tour happens in Canada, for example. She ends it in a stadium that doesn't have an existing franchise. That will be important. But in Toronto, the 6 events offered preferred seating, Rogers Center, to the 200-level season ticket holders who renew for the next 2 seasons. It also allowed people in Buffalo to get to the games, get to the stadium, because the 6 concerts were with a 4-day gap between each. So the Bills play the Chiefs there. What do we think of the timing? Though I understand she was not at that game. What a game. That's another story. Number 2, Russell Okung, the offensive lineman, Pro Bowl for the Carolina Panthers, $13 million salary, committed half to Bitcoin payment, $6.5 million, through the app Zap. And the bottom line is the 90,000 per Bitcoin worth, maybe well worth waiting for, especially with the Trump presidency, generational wealth for his family. Aaron Rodgers, Miami Dolphin receiver Odell Beckham, also on the Bitcoin train. Abu Dhabi has started a Bitball league with former Steelers Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and others involved in the process. The evolution will provide, quote, money for broken athletes there will be no more, says Okung. Well, maybe not, but the idea of taking an investment strategy, very important. That's number 2. Number 3, Live Golf, going to other venues. 10 of the 14 have been unveiled, 4 others expected. Jack Nicklaus's golf club previously hosting the 2015 President's Cup Incheon near Seoul, club in Chatham Hills, Indiana, events in Asia, including the one we just talked about, but also Riyadh, Hong Kong, and Singapore, events in Dallas, Valderrama, the event in Chicago at Bolingbrook. There are others. The bottom line is the stronger Live gets, some would say, the more likely there will be a settlement. We'll just have to see. That's number 3. Number 4, India's sports market up 100 to 130 billion, according to a report by Google and Deloitte. Look at the numbers. The demographics, Gen Z making up 43% of the number of 655 million people, driving demand for interactive and sophisticated experiences. 93% of Gen Z fans access sports content regularly. Women making up 36% of the fans. The apparel and goods market expected to double by 2030. The sports technology sector expected to reach $1 billion. This is a big deal to watch, not only for the global sports market, but for everybody that deals with it. And then finally, number 5, Formula One innovates its cooling technology. A single race has drivers losing 2 to 3 kilograms of kilos of weight due to excessive sweating, obviously very significant in the Gulf countries. It's becoming a point of personal health way beyond that. F1 mandates cooling kits in 2025, new technology. Driver cooling kits, the highest technology. Its safety innovators through the years. F1 always led the way, but this is part of its impressive safety standards. Regardless of the accident issues, this becomes very important as well. And that's the 5 to watch. Well, we'd like to thank Bob DuPuy for participating in our podcast this week, talking about Major League Baseball. I'd like to thank Kali Kazar for putting this together for us. We'd like to thank you for being part of On the Record on a regular basis, and looking forward to next week when we continue to probe inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.